Aloha, inspired moneymakers. Welcome to episode 8 of our live stream series, Investing for Impact, the rise of socially responsible investing. Today, we're diving deep into the transformative world of finance, where your investments can do more than just grow your wealth. They can make a meaningful impact on society and the planet. We'll explore the evolution of socially responsible investing, or SRI, from its ethical and religious roots to today's focus on environmental, social, and governance factors, commonly known as ESG. We're going to delve into the cutting-edge tools and technologies that are shaping the future of ESG investing. Think AI-driven analysis, blockchain transparency, and real-time monitoring. But that's not all. Investing can be deeply personal. So we'll discuss how you can invest with purpose, targeting sectors and themes that align with your values, whether it's education, healthcare, or climate change. And finally, we'll guide you through crafting a personalized portfolio that reflects who you are and what you stand for. So no matter if you're joining us live on YouTube or listening from your car or doing the dishes, get ready to be inspired. Let's make money moves that matter. Mahalo for joining us. Let's bring in our incredible panel of experts. I'm excited because one or two of our panelists they're joining us from the GIIN Impact Forum in Copenhagen, a premier in-person global gathering of impact investors. And let's start with, I actually didn't see who had come in. So let me start by welcoming Bruno Bertocci. He's chair of the CFA Institute ESG Technical Committee. He's served as managing director and head of the Sustainable Investors team at UBS Asset Management. He brings extensive experience in asset management, leading portfolio management strategies at UBS, and was responsible for developing a public securities impact measurement framework. Welcome, Bruno.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So excited to have you here. So coming from Copenhagen, we have Deborah Schwartz, Managing Director of Impact Investments at the MacArthur Foundation. She's overseen the commitment of more than $750 million to advance equity, inclusion, and sustainability. Specializing in catalytic capital, Deborah supports a range of initiatives from affordable housing to climate solutions. Welcome, Deborah. I'm so excited to have you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Glad that you could make it. And we have Laura Ortiz Montemayor coming in. I don't see her yet. She's also at the conference. Laura is founder of SVX Mexico, an impact investing advisory firm for Mexico and Latin America. With over 8 years of experience in wealth and asset management, her inaugural fund, Regenera Ventures, dedicated to investing in the regenerative transition for rural Mexico. She's an angel investor and a micro investor through collective finance in social and environmental impact companies. Welcome. I should
Thank you.
Laura. Laura, is that a better pronunciation? I don't know if Laura is on mute. Okay. So I will welcome in, we lost Laura. Rounding out our panel today, we have Kevin Peterson, who joins us from New Hampshire. Kevin serves as Special Projects Manager at the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. He previously served as Senior Program Officer for the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, where he designed a comprehensive impact investing program. Kevin, welcome to Inspired Money.
Delighted to be here. Thanks, Andy.
So let's get started. We're going to jump into segment 1. Welcome to a transformative moment in the world of investing. Picture a timeline that stretches back over 2 centuries, rooted in the ethical principles of religious communities like the Methodists. Leap to the 1960s, where the civil rights movement and anti-Vietnam protests gave socially responsible investments, or SRI, its voice. The first Earth Day of the 1970s turned our gaze toward environmental stewardship, while the 1980s saw investors rallying against apartheid in South Africa. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the narrative has evolved. We've moved from merely avoiding sin stocks to embracing a holistic approach known as ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. The market has responded, surging from $2.83 billion in 2015 to an astonishing $17.67 billion by late 2019. Today, as we grapple with the existential challenges like climate change and social inequity, SRI stands at the forefront, offering not just financial returns, but a chance to shape the world. So as you contemplate your next investment, remember, you're not just growing your wealth, you're crafting a legacy. Okay. How's Laura's audio? Is that working? Okay, so maybe not yet. Bruno, can you kick us off? Can you talk a little bit about how the public securities, like the measurement framework, how that has evolved over the years?
For sure. So let's start by saying that, when people talk about impact in the public equity space, that's kind of a complicated concept. The Global Impact Investment Network says that for something to be an impact investment, you have to have intentionality. In other words, you have to actually have intended for something to happen. You need to have measurability and verifiability. And most importantly, you have to have additionality. So this is easy in the private equity space, right? If you put up the money to improve a community's well water, well, it wasn't there before you showed up. It's there after you put up the money, and you can easily measure what happened afterwards. But if you own a portfolio of public securities, that's not so easy. And one of the things that I was involved with at UBS was actually building a portfolio of public securities for a very large Dutch pension fund that had the desire to create impact. And what we did is we started out by defining a universe of companies that had products and services that had external impact. In other words, products that actually had a net effect on water or that reduced pollution and so on. And then we partnered with academic institutions like the Harvard School of Public Health and the New York University's water team to devise metrics by which we would measure what the company's products actually did. And then we had a very vigorous engagement program to create additionality. But it's fair to say that when you're talking about impact in the public equity space, it's a real cutting edge area. Most people, when they're starting to talk about impact in the public equity space, are often really referring to ESG. And I like to differentiate between the two by saying ESG is first and foremost something that goes on within the four walls of the public company that you've invested in. It's how the board is composed, it's how the company uses resources, it's how it treats its employees. And you could have, a positive ESG sustainable candy bar company. That's an extreme example, but you get the t-shirt company, let's say. Uh, but you couldn't claim that the product generates any particular impact. Whereas, let's say you invest in a company that produces water filtering systems for communities in Latin America, you could pretty easily figure out what's the impact and start to measure it. So the products and services that you choose in the impact space is really important. And you need to have engagement because at the end of the day, you have to create additionality for it to be credible. So that's the world of public equity's impact. It's kind of a far out sphere of investing, but I was very proud to have been a leader in that space.
Deborah, the MacArthur Foundation has really been at the leading edge. How has its investment strategy evolved over the years? She may be frozen. So we'll go to Kevin, who built a program. Can you share what that looked like from the time that you started and how that evolved?
Sure. The New Hampshire Charitable Foundation is one of nearly 1,000 what are called community foundations, unlike the MacArthur Foundation, which is a private foundation set up by a family. A community foundation is a collection of philanthropic funds that operates under a nonprofit umbrella. Those funds are pooled, invested, and then about 5 to 6% of the proceeds every year are distributed in the form of grants to support community benefit activities, usually in the nonprofit sector within a particular place. Our place was the state of New Hampshire. And essentially what we're doing in our traditional model is that of the 100% of capital, the philanthropic capital that we were using, only 5% was directed to the activities that really our organization was committed to, whether it be housing or the environment or sustainable food or any other number of issues. So the question was what to do with the remaining 95% of that capital. And over the years, we had made a few investments that happened to touch down in New Hampshire. We made some forest land investments. We helped to create the Community Development Finance Institution called the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, which loans to low and moderate income individuals for housing and childcare and workforce development. But we never had a comprehensive strategy. So we looked at a way to take about $10 to $12 million of the overall portfolio, which at the time was a little more than $500 million, and devote it to investments that would touch down in New Hampshire, would benefit the people of New Hampshire, and give us a reasonable return. And we used a similar strategy that any other investor would do, a combination of private equity, public equity, fixed income, and other specialty sorts of loan activities. And since we started the program at the Charitable Foundation in 2017 with $10 million, the foundation has now adopted a more robust impact investing approach across its entire portfolio, which is now approaching $1 billion.
So one who has interest in investing with purpose, it is like multi-asset class. It's thinking about publicly traded stocks, bonds, and then there are other places too. Since you mentioned, it sounds like commodities, if like forestry, different areas.
Yeah, that's right. There are a variety of ways to achieve impact. The forestry example is a pretty good one. This was a case where we actually had a timberland investment company that was based in New Hampshire that was interested in securing private forest land and making sure that the harvests there were sustainable. And then in many cases, using some of the capital to actually, or generating capital by selling conservation easements, permanent conservation easements to a public entity of some sort, a statewide conservation group, the federal government, or another national group, so that land stayed in forestry and in sustainable forestry in perpetuity, and therefore could generate products, could generate jobs for local loggers and forest products processors, et cetera. So it has by making an investment in that sort of timberland, you could ensure that there was a sustaining economic value in the place where that forest land was located, and not have it all be, shift off to some other place or to the investors from Wall Street who might be interested in a profit, but might not be as interested in what happens in the local economy.
Deborah, the MacArthur Foundation has been leading edge. So can you share a little bit how your investment strategy has evolved? And I'm curious what cutting edge looks like at this moment.
Well, thanks, Andy. And cutting edge is not my hotel internet connection. So if I cut out again, I'm just going to turn off my camera. You know what I look like at this point, and hopefully that'll work. MacArthur Foundation is a global philanthropy headquartered in Chicago. We have offices in India and Nigeria. We have major grant-making programs that include climate solutions and criminal justice reform, journalism and media, and a commitment to our hometown of Chicago itself. A new initiative focused on local news that you may have read about. And we have a flagship MacArthur Fellows program, which announced a really extraordinary class of fellows just earlier today. So, at our core, we are a philanthropy, but for 40 years, starting in 1983, the foundation has used impact investments to extend the reach and deepen the impact of our work. So we do not use impact investments in every single area of our programmatic work. We take what we call a problem first, tool second approach. So we look for situations where a catalytic impact investment strategy can really add value to our philanthropic and impact goals. Historically, that has meant major support in the earliest years of the Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFI field. We had a 20-year initiative in affordable rental housing that was national in scope. We've been working in our hometown of Chicago with not only grants, but impact investments for a very long time, supporting affordable housing, business development in marginalized communities, and support for developers and entrepreneurs that are people of color and women who have historically faced significant capital access challenges, as is well known. So a wide range of activity. As you noted in the intro, we sort of see equity, inclusion, and sustainability as the broad umbrella for everything we do, but the work itself is highly targeted and specific to really the kind of additionality that was described earlier. We are looking specifically to fill the gaps that conventional investors, less risk-tolerant investors, more profit-minded investors can't or won't serve. So is there a situation where a small business entrepreneur is trying to get growth capital so they can meet the opportunity of today's infrastructure investments and green investments from the federal government, which are historic, unprecedented opportunities, but they lack the working capital to be able to compete for those contracts and to be successful. So there's a gap that if we can come in and help find a solution, a market-based solution, but one that really allows those entrepreneurs to build up their scale, capacity, credit, and track record, then they can move into competing more effectively in this large opportunity space. So that's just one example where there may be gaps that are transient, that we can come in, help an enterprise, a nonprofit, a for-profit, help a fund innovate, build a track record, scale, attract more capital. Maybe they're going to be attracting fully commercial market rate capital. Maybe it's a mix. We do not see it as a one-size-all. The capital that is needed to address the world's problems spans a spectrum. And that spectrum ranges from the impact first type of approach that we can take by virtue of our flexibility, being a philanthropy. It spans from impact first all the way over to finance first. And as was noted, ESG, investing in public equities, that's really on the finance first end of the spectrum. And we need that capital too. The problems are immense that we face. The needs to address the sustainable development goals are in the trillions and trillions of dollars. But often what we really need are solutions that harness and pull together all those different forms of capital, each playing the roles to which they are best suited.
Deborah, do you view those types of investments as higher risk and potentially higher return?
So the risk return profiles really vary depending on the sector and the nature of the problem. What's the nature of the capital gap itself? So in some cases, the investments are lower return than an ordinary investor might be looking for, say, an illiquid 10-year private loan with no collateral. But we know that the risk history of CDFIs and the performance has been very strong. So those are lower return than they might ordinarily seek, but the risk as well is lower. In other cases, the risk, because you're investing in very, very early stage breakthrough energy technologies, that risk might indeed be higher. I mean, as consistent with a seed stage, highly innovative investment. But the return potential could be quite a bit higher. And then we see everything in between. So I don't think there's a generalization. I know there's a lot of debate about, whether impact investments have trade-offs or don't have trade-offs. We really think we need to be beyond that trade-off conversation. It really needs to be about the additionality. Is it a gap? Would the impact, would the other capital happen, but for the impact investment that we are looking to make? For us, it's the but for piece that is really decisive. That's our form of impact investing. And what I don't want to suggest is that that needs to be everybody's form, because we partner with institutional investors, we partner with government, we partner with nonprofits. So we need to have, with family offices, we need to have a more inclusive view of what it means to do impact investing.
Do our panelists have anything to add? Otherwise, we'll move on to segment 2.
Deborah, I think
Welcome to the cutting edge of investing, where data and ethics converge in ESG analysis. Imagine a dashboard teeming with metrics that go beyond mere numbers. Over 90% of S&P 500 companies are already on board, tracking their environmental, social, and governance impacts. But how do we make sense of it all? Enter a suite of sophisticated tools. Data aggregators compile information from diverse sources, while AI algorithms sift through the noise to offer actionable insights. And let's not forget blockchain, ensuring transparency and accountability like never before. The metrics? They're comprehensive, from carbon footprints and waste management to board structures and shareholder rights. These indicators offer a 360-degree view of a company's ethical footprint. And it's not just for show. The EU has laid down a regulatory framework making certain metrics mandatory. But the future holds even more promise. Imagine real-time monitoring through Internet of Things sensors and the decentralization of ESG investment via blockchain. We're not just tracking, we're transforming. So as you invest, remember, you're not just betting on a company's financial performance, you're endorsing its impact on the world. Kevin, I'm not sure if you got cut off there right before we went to the segment.
Well, I just wanted to compliment what Deborah was saying about risk by saying that at least in the foundation world, there are multiple tools that can be deployed, and one of those tools is a grant. The other is relationship building and engagement with the grantee, and the third would be an impact investment or a loan or whatever. In the charitable foundation's case, as a community foundation, we would deploy all of those tools together, both to enable the organization that we're investing in to have more capacity to actually do the work that it's doing. A good example would be a community loan fund. You provide capital for them to loan, but you provide an operating grant to help them have the staff and the capacity to actually deploy that capital. And then to maintain a strong relationship throughout. And eventually that's where the metrics come back, where you can see directly engaging with that organization how they're performing, and they can report to you and understand better, help you understand how the impact of your dollars going to work in that place.
We'll welcome in Laura, who I understand is a recovering banker turned being more purpose-driven. You've really embraced educating investors. So I'm curious, what has your learning curve looked like from student to teacher?
Wow, an amazing question. I think it's been quite a ride and quite a long journey. Can you guys hear me all right? Because there's a little bit of background noise. So basically, my first impact investing course was in 2014, and it was what I say the American version of impact investing. That I think it was a little bit more venture capital with impact in that course. And then I went to Oxford to study the UK or European version. That was much more focused on being the public-private partnerships, the social impact bonds. And I saw some contrasts, but I think back in 2014, all impact investing education mostly came from the global north, and it was mostly in English content. So we were the first impact investing advisory firm that did impact investing courses in Spanish. And so there was this big hunger all throughout Latin America of so many investors, foundations, funds, and so many institutions that really needed and wanted impact investing education. And at first, I was only doing like the introduction of what I considered like the global thought leadership. But then we started doing our own thought leadership, and I think that was critical. I think in order not to be a rebel, but to question a little bit of the investment paradigms, and see what could be the evolution that Latin America could bring to impact investing. So, for example, questioning the regular spectrum, the framework of impact investing that starts in philanthropy, saying maximum impact, no returns, and like traditional investing, maximum returns, no impact, and all the shades in between. And we made our own framework, which is a holistic investment spectrum that said, okay, what's the life producing potential of investments? So what investments destroy life? What investments make life survive, and what investments could make life thrive. And so for us, the ones that make life thrive are the regenerative investments. And we started pointing our impact investing education towards a regenerative direction since 2018. And we started following a lot of the regenerative economy thought leadership. And we started co-creating with other impact investing practitioners in Latin America to see what else we could incorporate from the Latin American flavor, like indigenous wisdom, and so many things to question the current investment paradigms and have something that makes more sense to the local communities in Latin America. And I guess that was the beginning of the journey.
It's been quite a journey. Bruno, I want to ask you, since you've really been deeply involved in like screening and filters, like how important are standardized metrics in ESG investing? And then today, do you see things like AI-driven analysis in the ESG space?
I guess the answer is yes to both. So, what's been happening with sustainability data or ESG data mirrors what has happened with traditional financial data. So, traditional financial data, uh, when I started in the investment business, was not standardized around the world. So, Japanese accounting and Spanish accounting, US accounting was all different. And you spent an enormous amount of time trying to make apples for apples comparisons. And then the rise of the Financial Accounting Standards Board and the International Accounting Standards Board and the agreement between them in 2002 has taken us to where we are today, where financial data is highly standardized and coherent around the world. So sustainability data started to be formalized in accounting sense with the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. I was very involved with the formation of that. And carbon-related metrics really kind of rose out of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Data, which I was also on. And now both have been subsumed into the International Sustainability Standards Board. And so what you're seeing now is the emergence of a coherent accounting scheme and a reporting scheme for this data. We're a ways away from having it have the kind of universality and coherence that we see in financial data, but I would say we're 70% along the way. That anyone who uses a standardized ESG data service or has a Bloomberg terminal or anything like that has access to probably more data than you can really use. But there's certainly enough there, and it's industry specific data and it's material data that helps you complete your analysis of any prospective investment. So we've come a very, very long ways from a real dearth of data, really messy data, to reasonably well organized data that's reasonably comparable. Is it perfect? No, but it's way, way better than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Deborah, does the MacArthur Foundation use AI and data analytics in its impact investments?
Certainly, we use what we call impact measurement and management, IMM. That's become kind of the standard concept guiding how investors like ourselves that are doing impact first, catalytic, private investing, how we think about it. It's an interesting question whether AI will become a useful tool. Obviously, we're all of us at least that have not been deeply immersed in AI, we're all in early days of understanding what the new tools might be. But currently, that's not one of the things that we're putting to work. But I do want to give a quick reference to something called the Impact Management Project, or IMP. It now has a slightly different name. But what they did, and this is happening in parallel, probably a little bit of intersection with all the different efforts that Bruno described so well that have led to the ISSB and everything that's happening in that part of the market. But for those of us who are doing, on purpose, quite intentional, quite custom, quite targeted types of impact investing, whether it's venture, as Laura mentioned, you can have venture funds like an Impact America fund, which has layers of impact around racial equity and wealth building and so many other positive impacts in education and health and entrepreneurship. You can have that type of investment. You can be investing in a loan fund, as we've also heard about. You could be financing childcare facilities, affordable housing, and many other kinds of community-based assets. So regardless of which sector you're in and whether you're doing debt, equity, or guarantees, which we also do quite a bit, the Impact Management Project has given us a very distilled framework that came out of discussions with hundreds and thousands of investors of various kinds. You look at what the impact is supposed to be, what is the outcome, who is supposed to experience that impact, how much impact is supposed to happen. Contribution is another word for additionality. Would this investment flow happen without the impact investment that you're making? And then finally, what is the risk that the impact might not materialize as expected? So that 5-point framework can then be applied whether we're doing affordable housing as a strategy to break the cycle in and out of jail, whether we're looking at solar deployment in India in the small business and commercial sector, whether we're working with Raven Capital in Canada, which is the only Indigenous-led and focused venture fund that we know of today, but there will hopefully be more to come. So we can bring that 5-point framework and then let the impact analysis be quite specific. And I think, we're always looking for the balance so that we're not trying to have the absolute most granular, perfect metrics in the world, because we don't want to overly burden enterprises, nonprofits that may be new, that may be cash strapped. So we're trying to be mindful and respectful of the burden. We're trying to make sure we're collecting data that we really need, that we're going to analyze, not just to collect it, but really think about that question, and to also then share the learnings as we go. So we have major evaluations that are attached to all of our major initiatives, and that includes impact investing. And we have found this framework from the Impact Management Project to be a really valuable tool. There's also something called the Impact Frontiers Project, and that's also trying to come up with a way that you can, across different kinds of initiatives, think about this risk, reward, and impact intersection that we were talking about before.
Kevin, in your TED Talk, you talk about, people ask you, how can they get involved? How can they make a difference? I love hearing all about the analytics, the monitoring, the measurement, but the average person, what should they do?
It's a great question. I am a big fan of keeping my money as local as possible, or at least asking the question before I spend $1 or I invest $1, where can I put this that it will turn over again and benefit my local community? There's a fair amount of research that shows that $1 spent on Main Street of any community in the country in the US is going to turn over 2 to 3 times. So when you spend $5 for a coffee, at least that's what it costs where I am, in your local coffee shop that's owned by a local business person, that person is going to be spending that money for employees, for rent, for sourcing materials and equipment, et cetera, for that local business. So that means your money is multiplying in the local economy. So my first thought is, as much as you possibly can, spend money in your place, because that place will benefit multiple times over. The second is simply to ask the question, I have an investment portfolio, I have a retirement portfolio. I'm asking my advisors, where is my money invested, and what options do I have to think about aligning that money with what I care about? I care a lot about local food. And so when a new mutual bank was forming in the state of New Hampshire, the first one in 100 years, that was going to focus on the local economy, the local food economy, everything from farmers to value-added producers, I wanted in. And I have both an equity investment in that small bank, very small one, but I also keep a deposit account there, because that's money that the bank can lend into those small businesses and economic activities that I really care about. And that keeps the money flowing here where I am. So spend your money on Main Street, ask the question where your investment dollars are going and how you can adjust that to align with what you care about.
Great advice. I'd like to move on to segment 3. Welcome to the future of finance, where your investments do more than just grow. They make the world a better place. We're talking about impact investing, a strategy that's not just about dollars and cents, but about meaningful change. The Bridgespan Group has spotted sectors ripe for impact: education, healthcare, and financial inclusion. Imagine your investment dollars improving literacy rates or making healthcare accessible to marginalized communities. But it's not just sectors, it's themes. From championing gender equality to combating climate change, impact investing is a vehicle for your values. Picture your portfolio powering renewable energy projects or bridging the gender gap in workplaces. Now, measuring this impact is crucial but complex. We need standardized frameworks to avoid impact washing, where good intentions get lost in the noise. But make no mistake, the potential for positive change is enormous. So as you consider your next investment, remember, it's not just about what you earn, it's about the difference you make. Welcome to Investing with Purpose. Deborah, you gave us some context into how to monitor and measure. Are there any themes or sectors that you're particularly excited about in terms of impact?
Well, it's a great question. And it's hard. I'm smiling because we've had this incredible opportunity. I personally have been doing nonprofit finance, public finance for an investment bank, finance as the head financial person for a nonprofit, and then almost 30 years at MacArthur working across so many areas. So we have an organization working to provide safe housing for women or survivors of domestic violence, which is in the UK. We have incredible women leaders in India who have created a venture fund for the next billion, the rising class in India, by providing essential goods and services in health and education and agriculture and financial inclusion. So asking me if I'm, would like place one of those impacts above another is really, really fun to think about, but pretty tough as a question goes. I would just say that, we are both heartened by some of the opportunity ahead of us in the climate arena in particular to bring together social justice, racial equity, and climate solutions. I think that's one of the most essential areas of all, because the time is of the essence. Investments are happening thanks to both public and private funds. And we know that if we do not pay attention to how that all rolls out, it's going to be business as usual. And the largest, most well-heeled players are going to be the ones that profit. And the communities that need the jobs and the entrepreneurship and the benefits the most are going to be left with much too little. And that's how it has played out in our country in the past. I wrote about this in a piece in Green Money about a year ago, and again in January on one of the foundation blog pages. So I do think climate justice in what has been called the decisive decade, climate justice is a challenge and an incredible imperative as well as an opportunity. But we can't be focused on climate alone. We have to be thinking as impact investors, as citizens of this world and stewards of this planet. We have to also be thinking about people and places. And we have to be thinking about how we close the racial wealth gap, the financing gap that makes it far too difficult for too many entrepreneurs of color and for women and others who have been historically underrepresented in finance and investing and business. It's too hard for them to raise the money that they need and to have a fair shake at building their enterprise and their investment vehicles. So we want impact investing to be inclusive. We want it to be equitable. And we want all of the best ideas and the best ventures to have access to the capital that they need to make a difference in the world.
Laura, whether it's your venture fund or SVX Mexico, how do you approach theme-based investing?
Well, for us, impact asset classes look very different. In Mexico and Latin America, the universe of available products is really, really small. So just naming some ESG examples, like our first ESG index in the Mexican public equities started in 2020. So just imagine, like, it's super, super recent. So we don't have the universe of available vehicles and opportunities that it's unparalleled what you have available in the US, for example, or Canada, or Europe. So in Mexico, what we're doing is many of our clients are development finance institutions like USAID, like Global Affairs Canada, but we also get a lot of family offices. And since we started doing so much investor education, we get tons of retail investors, and some, close to being a family office, and then family office institutions and funds. And so what we started doing is the Sustainable Navigator or Sustainable Investments Navigator together with Citibank Foundation in Mexico. So basically they sponsored us to do two databases, but it's public databases for Mexican investors of what is available in the public markets for them if they want any ESG or sustainable strategies, and what is available for them in the private capital space if they want an impact investing opportunity. So currently, we have a major focus. Everything we do is 1,000% biased towards biodiversity regeneration, because the lens we are taking towards climate finance is mostly an adaptation approach, since Mexico is absolutely vulnerable to so many climate vulnerabilities. So we do a multi-sectoral or cross-sectional between mitigation and adaptation, and we think nature-based solutions are one of those major investment opportunities in both Mexico and Latin America, because we're a biodiversity hotspot. And so we're really championing nature-based solutions above most themes. And precisely because we see the social and environmental impact in nature-based solutions as indivisible. So we see that it is possible to heal the environment through communities, and it's possible to heal communities through nature. So it's a reciprocal relationship that is super beneficial. And mostly our economies are based on commodity extraction mentality. So what we're doing is right now taking advantage of the ecosystem service monetization, starting with carbon bonds, but also biodiversity credits or biodiversity banks, which are very used in Colombia. And so really building a new asset class of biodiversity regeneration available in both Mexico and Latin America. And most of it comes from agricultural commodities, forestry commodities, but we also have other types of thematics in the sustainable investments navigator, and that's what we show to the investors. And just one other example, for example, in the US, you have Kiva since like so many years ago, and people that have, not a large wealth can be able to invest, and you have community banks. But in Mexico, the first legal crowdfunding platform for impact was just regulated like 4 years ago. It's called Red Girasol, and you can start investing from the equivalent of $25. And so Red Girasol has been one of our, let's say, blended finance partners for a while now. And it's amazing because if we imagine an agroforestry cooperative, coffee cooperative, and we put it in that platform, we get to showcase through a webinar to 15,000 Mexican retail investors. So it's not only an investment opportunity for them, but it's also a growth opportunity to get clients if it's a B2C opportunity. So it's just, asset classes are still growing in emerging markets, and we definitely don't have, the universe that you guys have available. But I think we're starting to have some possibilities, some diversity, and I think through education is how investors are starting to make their decisions and move in the capital.
I love the idea that small dollar amounts can have a large impact. Let's move to segment 4. Welcome to a new era of investing, where your portfolio is a reflection of you. Gone are the days when investing was solely about financial gains. Today, it's about aligning your money with your morals. According to Forbes, over 80% of investors aged 40 and up, and a staggering 90% of those between 24 and 30, are keen on making their portfolios a mirror of their values. So how do you make your portfolio your own? First, there's screening. Think of it as your ethical filter, weeding out companies that do not align with your values, be it environmental concerns or diversity in leadership. Next, we have asset allocation, the art of balancing risk and return, tailored to your unique financial goals. Historically, this idea has roots in faith-based investing, where ethical screens were applied to exclude sectors like gambling or abortion. But today, it's a broader movement, especially among younger investors who are driving this trend into the mainstream. Remember, your portfolio is more than just numbers. It's a statement of who you are and what you stand for. So as you ponder your next investment move, ask yourself, does it align with your values? Because in this new age of investing, your values are your most valuable asset. Bruno, you were very involved on the institutional side of impact investing. Can you share some challenges and solutions in values-driven investing?
You bet. So my analogy for this space has always been food, and here's what I mean by that. When I was a kid, my mom would serve chicken for dinner, and we never asked, where did this chicken come from? Today, people want to know everything there is to know about what's on the table in front of them. And the same change has taken place with investment portfolios. It used to be people really only cared about volatility and returns. That people want to know now, how are those returns generated? What do these companies do? What do these products do in the world that we live in? What kind of footprint do these companies have? A million questions about the contents of portfolios. And so the idea that the content of the portfolio and how the companies in your portfolio relate to the world that we live in is it's everywhere. You can't escape it. Now, different people have different ideas about what should be in or out of their portfolios, and that's fine, but the concept that you can align the contents of your investments with your own personal philosophy, I think that's almost ubiquitous now. I did want to pivot to one super interesting and I think leading edge area that people have been looking at and I've been involved with, which is the whole concept of transition financing for very high greenhouse gas emitters. And this is effectively investing in a portfolio of companies that are huge emitters in providing the capital that's needed to change their production facilities. I'll give you an example. One of the studies that we did before I left showed that if you took a stainless steel producer and change their production process from a highly energy intensive natural gas and other sources of energy to produce stainless steel and switched it to clean energy, hydroelectric and solar, you would actually accumulate enough carbon credits that it would help finance the transformation of the plant and then produce stainless steel that was effectively green. And there are a lot of industries that look like that. Some of the most energy intensive industries are industries you can't escape from: steel, cement, aluminum. So you can't do away with those products, but can you produce them in a green fashion? And what our studies showed is that under the right circumstances, as you shift the production methodologies, you can self-finance those changes through a combination of risk capital and carbon credits. And the thing that would really close the circle would be is if Europe finished the process of having carbon budgets for industries and barrier taxes for high carbon equivalents for low carbon equivalent. So for instance, if you're sourcing steel to make a car and you get charged for the scope 3 emissions that are embedded in the steel, you, the buyer, are going to shift to a greener form of steel because it will effectively be cheaper. But you need to have a barrier tax to keep steel that has a really high carbon input but looks like it's the same price, effectively shifting it to a higher price. And I think that regime is coming. It's clear that we're never going to hit our glide path towards a lower degree future unless we do something about these heavy carbon emitters that make things that we use every single day that aren't going to go away. And I think that's transformational, and I think it actually has huge return potential. It's been shunned by investors because people say, well, I don't want a whole portfolio full of companies that look like that. But if you have a portfolio of those kinds of companies that are transformational and you're providing the risk capital and the management has an actual plan to reduce their carbon footprint, you can get from A to B. And it, I think, potentially really interesting because it would actually get us on a better path to where we need to go.
Laura, as a banker, you felt like you were helping the rich get richer. How does it feel to be doing the impactful work that you're doing in your home country today?
Wow, it feels. I feel like I've been re-identifying myself all this time. Somebody once told me in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I'm actually defining myself now as a mompreneur. But in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, somebody told me that your identity is the opposite of your potential. So it's like, wow, blown away by that. And like, how can we unpeel all the layers of our identity, explore that, question that, and see what is within me driving extractivism? What is within me driving colonialism? What is within me driving patriarchy, inequality? Like, how am I part of this? And so it was, for me, it has been completely transformative. Within me, there are indigenous genes, but there's also colonialistic genes, and I've only been educated in a modern university kind of education. So I had to explore, the edges. I had to explore things that are more alternative and things that are more outside the mainstream, in order to re-educate myself and unlearn tons of paradigms. So I feel like I'm in a healing process, and I heal myself while I, bring that healing process to others. So I think it's super profound. I think it's super spiritual. I think regeneration comes from within. You cannot start investing in regeneration outside of you if you are not willing to bring it from within. And there's a proverb, I think, from India that is like, when you break an egg from the outside, life ends. And when you break an egg from the inside, life begins. So anything that you want with a positive outcome has to start from the inside out. And so I've been like, I'm remembering one session with a next gen family office. And I remember there was this investment thesis on regeneration, but it was being called as a Trojan horse within the investment of the larger family. And I was shocked by that. I was like, how can we be using a war metaphor for an investment thesis that it's supposed to be regenerating? So I kind of questioned that, and it brought, I think, the light to some complexities and some conflicts within the family, and the way that we are framing, oh, let's regenerate the world and let's regenerate the planet. It has to come from within, and there's always a process, and there's always a complexity to human relationships. But I think it's really important to see that if we're working in sustainability, we need to be sustainable ourselves. And the first thing that needs to be sustainable is relationships. And relationships require a ton of love and a ton of radical collaboration. So I think I feel transformed, and I've heard that people can only be changed if you feel the heat or if you see the light. And it's better if it's possible that we can change the world through the light. So that's what I'm trying.
That's beautiful. Let's wrap it up and hit segment 5. Welcome to the nuanced world of impact investing, where success isn't just about dollars, it's about change. How do you measure that? Stanford Social Innovation Review breaks it down into 4 phases. First, estimating impact. Before you invest, assess the social return. Use frameworks like social return on investment to weigh the benefits against the costs. Second, planning impact. Choose your metrics wisely. Will you use a scorecard or a logic model? Make sure it aligns with your mission. Third, monitoring impact. Keep tabs on your investment. Use real-time data to measure social outcomes alongside financial returns. Finally, evaluating impact. Once the investment matures, assess its social footprint. Was it worth it? This is where you decide your next steps. As impact investing grows, the call for standardization is loud. So let's not reduce impact to just a buzzword. Make it count. Kevin, the program that you put together at the New Hampshire Community Foundation has continued to grow. When you started it, how did you handle managing return expectations in portfolio construction and metrics?
Well, on return expectations, we actually crafted a lower expectation on return, because on financial return, traditionally a community foundation has to earn somewhere between 8 and 9% per year in its portfolio. That enables a distribution for grants of about 5%. It enables 1% for the cost of running the organization and 2 to 3% for inflation. So we took out the inflation portion of it. And then it was a question of how we can come up with a similar portfolio to a traditional distribution of asset classes. And it was really difficult. The most challenging one was trying to find a public equity sleeve that had a geographic focus that somehow touched down in the place that we cared about, which is the state of New Hampshire, and by extension, the other New England region states. So that was the toughest one. And then because the investment opportunities in a very small state are somewhat limited, we literally had to build on the relationships that we had with other organizations, with nonprofit housing trusts, with other nonprofits that were looking for capital. We had a very strong relationship with our community loan funds. So we started layering investments on an annual basis into into the community loan fund because he knew that they had a 30-year track record. So it's not easy, particularly when we have a geography, in our case, that is only one state and a relatively small one. An organization like MacArthur has a global footprint and has multiple initiatives, whereas ours is the Charitable Foundations was very place focused, as is my current organization, the Community Development Finance Authority. We're looking to have an impact within the physical boundaries of the state of New Hampshire, and that is by its nature somewhat limiting. And yet it enables us to be creative within that landscape and not be drawn to other opportunities that might seem attractive, but that don't have that don't touch down within our geography.
Deborah, in your experience, how does one balance this pursuit of profit and purpose?
So I think that is, of course, a core question. And for some investors who are coming at it from a fiduciary type organization where there's a mandate and regulations that may be governing them, those regulations, that legal and fiduciary context is going to shape how they think about profit and purpose and which comes first. So they may well need to start with, just as you just heard, a really cogent way of thinking about this for Kevin's organization of saying, well, we need this much to distribute grants and this much to operate, and we need this much to allow for inflation. So you start with that. But it does, as you can hear from Kevin, it doesn't mean that you're giving up impact. It's just recognizing the financial reality of your organization. A very simple way to put it is no money, no mission, right? So if they put themselves out of business by not paying attention to those parameters, we are all at a great loss, and especially the communities in New Hampshire that look to them. So in some cases, you, like a foundation like MacArthur, we also have fiduciary duties. We happen to have something called the program-related investment, which is permitted under the tax code for private charitable foundations. There's a set of rules around it, and it can be cumbersome from some organizations to make what we call PRIs or to receive them. But we have been doing it for 40 years. We have a track record. We have found that we can do these kinds of very high impact loans, investments, and guarantees. We can preserve our impact investment capital and have the impact that we seek and unlock literally billions of dollars of additional capital that could not flow without the seeding, the scaling, and the credit enhancement that we're able to provide. So for us, we start with impact and we say, let's absolutely maximize the impact of these very unusual, flexible, patient, risk-tolerant dollars, catalytic dollars. Let's start there, of course, staying within the framework. But we are very fortunate that the way we've approached impact investing is to allow the impact investment dollars to be essentially a quasi-revolving fund with a capital preservation objective. So we do make returns on the capital, but we're using that to replenish the losses that will inevitably occur. So if we were very poor stewards of that capital, we would have losses running like crazy and we wouldn't be able to preserve the capital. But what in fact has happened is we've taken outsized risk, we've been patient, we've been able to support innovators, we've been able to go deep with our impact, preserve the capital, actually build a small margin beyond that, and create almost like an evergreen type resource. So that's a different approach, but I'm very mindful that's enabled by a very particular and very fortunate set of financial and philanthropic constraints. And every investor, every family, every institution, is going to bring their own lens to this, and they're going to think about, is racial equity or gender or housing or community development or environmental and climate solutions. Every investor, just like every philanthropist, needs to decide where they want to make a difference. And I think the most important thing is not to be afraid to jump in, not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, to allow space to experiment and learn and find the things that work for your own individual self, or for your institution. And as you've already heard from Laura, there are many different gateways and opportunities, community development credit unions, community development banks. If you are an experienced venture investor, there is just an incredible array of private equity and venture funds that have taken shape over the last decade. So that's become a space as well. There are bond opportunities, social bonds, and these are all before you even get to sort of the ESG, public equities space that we talked about at the beginning. So you had a framework in the video. I would just share out again from the Impact Management Project. A is for avoiding harm. And that's what, as you rightly point out, negative screening. That's the oldest form, in some sense, of socially responsible investing, going back to the Quakers and the Methodists, the anti-apartheid movement, now the fossil-free efforts to divest. So A, avoid harm. B, generate benefits to society and the planet. That's also increasingly called ESG or SRI, but that is the affirmative seeking of companies. And I loved the comments at the beginning that those are companies where you're looking like inside the company to say, how is it run? What is it doing? What's its business model? But you're also looking for companies that are not having adverse effects, but are actually generating positive effects through their labor practices, their production, their supply chain sourcing, and all of that. And then finally, C. So A, avoid harm, B, benefits to society, and C, contribute to solutions. So that's what I call kind of the deep end of the impact pool. And that's where you're looking for very targeted opportunities because you care about survivors of domestic violence, or you're really interested in the racial equity wealth gap, where you're finding things that are actually, hopefully, if they're successful, moving the needle toward an actual targeted solution. So A, B, C, and we can have all of those in a portfolio at the same time. There's no rule saying you have to have one approach.
Bruno, any final?
That was longer than
go
you
ahead,
Andy. So.
Bruno, any final thoughts on evaluating financial and social return on investment?
Oh, I remember very early in my investment career, one of my mentors said, "Hey, don't forget, good business is good business." And what I take from that is, look, if you run a company well, if you have good management, a good board, good products, brand equity, a good customer base, and a product that solves a problem for the customer, you're going to be in business for a really long time, and there's nothing like a portfolio of businesses that are reasonably valued that look like that. And what I found in my investment experience is that you give up nothing by looking for companies that have those features. And in general, our public equity portfolios have performed extremely well. They're competitive against passive alternatives, and they have a lot of features that are good, in terms of all the things that Deborah was talking about, how the employees are treated, how the whole thing works. So, sustainable investing is really, I think, a superior way to get results for clients. It's really as simple as that.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and really inspiring me and the audience, seeing all the very good work and positive impact that each of our panelists are having. I want to thank the audience for joining our Inspired Money Revolution, one live stream at a time. I encourage everybody to visit our panelists and follow our panelists, support our panelists. Deborah Schwartz from the MacArthur Foundation. You can find her at macfound.org. Laura Ortiz Montemayor at svx.mx. Bruno Bertocci, you can find him on LinkedIn. And Kevin Peterson, he's at the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority, which is nhcdfa.org. Thanks to all our panelists. To everybody, please join us next week on October 11th. We have a little bit something different. We're moving from impact investing to the inspired home, designing your life with intention. I'll leave you with this. Your homework is to think about profit and purpose, and think about how and where you can make an impact and what's most meaningful to you. Do one thing this week that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thank you, everybody.